Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to yet another Mortal Kombat video. Now today, with us only a few mere days away from that highly anticipated gameplay reveal, we could tackle a lingering question that has been overshadowing the community since the Mortal Kombat 1 reveal. And that is, of course, the possible return of the Dragon King Onaga. Someone that I think everyone was kind of expecting to come out that portal. But what's to say that there isn't more than meets the eye? With Shang Tsung as a pre-order bonus, something typically associated with sub-bosses, it's naturally opened up the window for the Dragon King to return. But how can this be? Well, in order for us to understand how this could happen, or even really be possible, we must touch on ideas and concepts in the established canon, the interesting ways he could return, and of course, how is this all possible? Well, before we do start, here is a quick disclaimer that this is all purely based in theory. Thus, what they do in game could be completely different from what I'm talking about here. Nonetheless, this will make for an interesting video despite that. It also allows for a deep dive on topics that I've actually never touched on before. Now it is worth mentioning that this theory is strongly reliant on both endings of Aftermath, where the timelines essentially diverge and split. One being the Liu Kang ending with the Great Kung Lao, and Shang Tsung's apocalyptic world, as we can also presume that the Liu Kang and Shang Tsung we see in the trailer are the same entities from the previous established canon. Again, currently, NetherRealm is yet to confirm whether or not these two are the same entities, but it is a pretty safe assumption. But something I must bring back into the fold are the retconned Mortal Kombat X comics, because it was a retcon that caught us by surprise, and I think I now know why that was the case, as it was rather sketchy with how it was handled. But if my theory is right here, then I'm pretty sure I know how this is being used to the narrative's advantage. The first big question on everyone's mind is, where could Onaga actually derive from? Because there's two different timelines we're juggling with here. Well, it doesn't really make sense for him to originate from Liu Kang's vision, seeing as he's built an entire world around his vision. It simply wouldn't make sense for someone like Onaga to come from here. And whilst this Liu Kang hasn't met the Dragon King from his time period, he has mentioned in his intros that he is aware of him. Thus, I'd imagine that Liu, of all people, wouldn't be foolish enough to create a being that has historically challenged the gods. That would be unbelievably foolish on his part. So naturally, this takes us to the Shang Tsung ending, and in many ways, this actually makes so much more sense. At the end of Aftermath, instead of creating his own world, Shang Tsung instead goes on to conquer his own reality, with the Order and Chaos Realm being the only two to slip through his grasp. Thus, there seems to be survivors of his onslaught, and if you really think about it, it's actually not very different from what Shao Kahn did in Pursuit of the Realms. So it is indeed possible that Shang Tsung may be under the influence of the One Being. But as powerful as the One Being is, historically, there's only ever been one individual that has avoided his influence, and that was Onaga prior to his demise. Thus, I think beings of high divinity may in fact be strong-willed enough to ward off his influence, as it was only up until Onaga died where he was susceptible to his influence. So is Shang suffering a similar fate? I definitely doubt it. Although I of course cannot be sure. I'd imagine that the divinity of the hourglass possibly allows him to defy its will, especially seeing as he can quite literally hop into Liu Kang's reality. So it wouldn't surprise me that whilst he may be following the One Being's ambitions, Shang could simply be doing this of his own volition. But how does Onaga come into the fold here? Because he's dead, right? not really. During the 2020 retcon of the comic book line, it meant that a lot of certain verbal exchanges between characters, referencing the events in the comics, and what came afterwards were non-canon. For those of you unaware of this tie-in series, one of the biggest and interesting points during its run was setting up Goro to become the new host for Onaga, something that would happen prior to MK11, but completely off-screen. Understandably, much to the dismay of many. However, with this retcon in play, it not only now erases his death, but technically leave Onaga completely untouched in this timeline. So in this timeline, both Goro and Reptile are still valid hosts for the Dragon King, with both even being alive and absent during the events of Mortal Kombat 11. Now, hypothetically, if Onaga was to return, how could he contest someone like Shang Tsung, especially with the Hourglass of Time at his fingertips? Well, I think there's one item that could contend with the Hourglass, and that is the Kamidogus of old, or more specifically, the one Kamidogu. Kamidogus themselves quite literally translate to God Tool, and each Kamidogu has the ability to warp its corresponding realm. It's an exceptionally powerful tool, but with the one Kamidogu, that is an entirely different ballgame, and it's also something people barely know of, having only been briefly featured during Tanya's and Onaga's Deception ending. But what is the one Kamidogu? Well, it's what happens when you take all 6 of the Kamidogus and use Shinnok's amulet to infuse them into a singular being. From here, it not only gives you control of the 6 realms themselves, but the literal fabric of reality. We even see a brief glimpse of this in Onaga's arcade ladder ending, where he quite literally takes on the Elder Gods himself and vanquishes them as the one being. So, is this possible? I'd say 100% yes. You see, if Shang is able to defy the one being's influence, then a recently resurrected Onaga would be the next perfect host. And with the Kamidogus now largely untouched, due to the retcon, and possibly reverting back to medallions and Shinnok's amulet in the care of the Special Forces, upon Dark Raiden's demise, the pieces are all in place here. We also must keep in mind that whilst the Dragon King may be a physical juggernaut, as we have seen in Deception, he is a meticulous tactician, someone that will bind his time in order to achieve his goal. Plus, that Onaga arcade ladder ending could actually now be seen as an omen of the future. Just this time with Shang Tsung at the helm, opposed to that of the Elder Gods. But how exactly does this matchup stack? Does the one Kamidogu have enough power to stack up to Kronika's Hourglass? In my opinion, I'd say most definitely. And even with those magical MacGuffins aside, at a physical base form, Onaga completely annihilates Shang, even with Reptile as his base host. And that's not even us touching on the possibility that Goro could come into the equation. Now if we compare the one Kamidogu to the Hourglass of Time, it's kind of essentially the Reality Stone fighting the Time Stone. And as incredibly strong having the ability to warp time is, being able to alter the world to your own vision is far more broken to me than what the Hourglass has. Because if you think about it, Onaga could literally snap the Hourglass out of existence, no longer part of this reality. Plus, in many ways, this is also a great opportunity to introduce the one being into the fold, keeping it largely separate from the main new timeline canon. So, could Onaga return? Yes, I think that possibility has never been higher. Could he overthrow Shang? Most certainly, at least if the circumstances are right. It also helps that there's clearly been a passage of time from Mortal Kombat 11 to Mortal Kombat 1. But now, my real question is, how does Liu Kang fall into the equation? Well, that's kind of the tricky part of this. Because if Onaga is to become the one being, could I see a reason for him to go after Liu Kang? No, not really. He's essentially one. But I do think that it would take some mastercraft wordsmithing on Shang Tsung's part to kind of influence and nudge the Dragon King, to show him a world beyond his own that he could merge and absorb, becoming an even greater one being. This could also be seen as an opportunity for Shang to kind of redeem himself by engaging with Liu Kang in the hopes of having him stop Onaga, which wouldn't be out of the cowardice nature of the sorcerer. We also must keep in mind that we don't know how Liu's reality works. We don't even know if the foundation of this world molds into the previous canon of the one being, as it is one that is forged in Liu's vision. So the foundation could be something completely different, and could be something that Onaga hungers for. So Shang could indeed be sent out as a scout to retrieve information on how to conquer it. Then again, there's always the possibility that Liu Kang is a MacGuffin of sorts, like his blood is needed for some kind of ritual, as it was implied in MK11, but the two were blood relatives of sorts. But with how much is retconned here, I don't know how much of that could translate over. And I think the previous ideas I've established with Onaga and the one being are much better and more in line with what you've come to expect from Mortal Kombat. Whilst I know a lot of you are tired with time travel, I know, trust me, God I know, but the dual endings of Aftermath could really work to this story's favor. And truth be told, in many ways, I don't want the death of these comics to be in vain. They are a really good read, with a ton of great ideas, that did dabble in a lot of the expansive canon from the 3D era. Mind you, they did repackage a lot of things along the way, like the Kamidogu daggers, and even Onaga, but this was all to the benefit of the story. They granted us a really strong telling of Reiko and Havoc. The ideas and frame is clearly something very, very special. And I know that many of us wanted that comic book line to be adapted into its own official game. So in many ways, this could be seen as a positive step forward. Now, let's be honest and kind of real here. The return of Onaga is long overdue. And with Shang Tsung and Liu Kang having obtained raw godhood, why shouldn't a character as powerful and as untouched as Onaga be left on the sidelines without the same treatment? If you think about it, he's the next natural step in the equation, as he's a being that literally challenged the gods. He's a character that's exceptionally close to that level of divinity. Thus, a minor lore buff to him is all he kind of needs to tip the scale to become the next big bad. I think that this would be quite refreshing going forward, as it allows us to play around with a different villain. But that's just an idea on my end. With that said, what are your current thoughts on Onaga's return? Do you think these ideas are viable and could happen? Please do comments down below. As you know, I love to hear what you have to say. I'm a huge advocate for this character's return, as well, we haven't seen him since Armageddon, and I really do think this is a great opportunity to have him resurface. But that's just an idea on my part. Anywho, that's been it for me for now. So as always everyone, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting, as we are only a few mere days away from that fantastic Mortal Kombat 1 reveal. Take care everyone, I'll see you all soon.